Hi there, esteemed audience, and welcome to another episode of Middle Grade Ninja. This is episode 199. So, for 198 episodes, I've been telling you that I'm your host, Rob Kent, author of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees, and that's still 100% true. But for 198 episodes, I've been advising you to go and download your free copy. And because I know you're a loyal member of the audience, you've probably already done that. But if you haven't, from this episode going forward, Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees will retail at full price. And the reason for that change is one, I want to make sure people know that they are getting a high quality book that's well worth their money and their time. But two, I've got three new books coming out this year, and I don't want them to have to compete with a free ebook. The first of those books is Rob Worm's Bird Adventure. I'm going to be telling you more about that the closer we get to March 23rd of 2023. You can see the brand new cover at middlegradeninja.com. Head there right now to get more information about the book, as well as information about my other novels and interviews with thousands of authors, literary agents, editors, book people, the world's best people. All of that's available at middlegradeninja.com. And the show has been becoming a little bit more popular, and that's due to you, esteemed audience, because you've been telling people how much you enjoy the show and inviting them to come and listen as well. I hope that you'll continue to do that. If you haven't taken the time yet to write a review, I hope you'll do that as well. That helps me out, and that helps to grow the show, which helps every author who appears on the show. The reason I bring that up, a little bit of inside baseball, in the past, in order to bring you the best literary agent interviews that I can make available for you, I would email 10 literary agents in the hopes that maybe 2 or 3 would say yes. That's just been the percentage rate in the past. Last year, for the first time, I emailed 10 literary agents on the same day, and 10 literary agents all said yes, which is great. We all had amazing conversations, and you've got great conversations to listen to. But because of that, I have been spacing them out and releasing them slowly. I try never to release too many interviews of the same type, so I want the show to be varied. So sometimes you're hearing author conversations, sometimes you're hearing conversations with editors. I want the show to be a little bit different each week. So this conversation with Nikki Terpilowski happened back on April 26th of 2022. Now, we still talk about evergreen topics regarding publishing, regarding submissions, regarding things you're going to want to know that are still very relevant to what you're doing here in January of 2023. But when we talk about current events, or when she talks about where she's at for the year, I want you to have that context. That it was April 26th of 2022 that we had this conversation. Esteemed audience knows I never summarize anyone else's biography. Why would I make you sit through me blundering through that? So if you would give esteemed audience an overview of your background, and we'll go from there.
Sure. I started Holloway Literary in 2011, so that's 10 years of being a literary agent. I represent clients in a lot of different fields. It just kind of depends on what I'm interested in, and but romance, women's fiction, young adult, domestic suspense, mystery, nonfiction, some light sci-fi and fantasy, and I also I do film rights for my clients and moving into doing a little bit of producing. We'll see how that goes.
So I saw that you had a bachelor's degree in English and marketing with a minor in creative writing, and then you got a graduate degree in international relations. Was that all in service of a plan to become a literary agent, or were you just a fan of publishing? When did you get the literary agent bug?
Right. Well, after all of my education, totally no strategy, which really concerned my parents, particularly my dad, when I told him I was getting an English major. He was hoping that I was going to be a teacher, and I was like, nope, I just like to write and read, and I wanted to take classes that I liked, so it ended up becoming like an English major. And then, I'm also I love to write, so I just basically took the things that I liked, and it ended up with like an English and creative writing. I remember my junior year, my advisor was like, maybe you should, she gave me a book. It was like 20 careers for English majors or something like that. And so I looked at it and I thought, okay, maybe marketing, PR, something like that would be of interest to me because I really had no plan. I just knew that I liked to write and read. And I thought if I took classes and got a degree in something that I liked, I would eventually do what I love. Like I said, my dad was really worried, but so it kind of led me into marketing communications, just fields where things where I could write in a corporate setting and create, marketing plans and PR, all that kind of good stuff. And after a while, I got married. I had my first two sons, and I realized that I wanted to get into like publishing. I wanted to work with books. So I interned with Elaine English in DC. I was living in Virginia at the time, and really loved the business. And I wanted to, when you're an intern, you think, okay, next step is to try to find a position. And because at that time, remote work wasn't really a thing. I was in Virginia. The industry was, primarily in New York, and I couldn't find any sort of like junior literary agent position or anything like that. So I opened my own agency. I just started, and I got really, really lucky. I was invited to Moonlight and Magnolia conference in Atlanta, Georgia. Met most of my first clients there, and just started just rock and rolled and started signing clients and making deals, and haven't stopped.
It's a bold move. Start your own literary agent. Obviously, it's worked out. Your dad needn't have worried because here you are. You've got a successful literary agent agency all these years later. What can those who are thinking of doing the same learn from your success in founding your own literary agency right off the bat? What were the most difficult things you didn't anticipate, and what was maybe a little bit easier than you thought it would be?
Right. Well, I mean, I grew up with really intelligent, supportive parents. And I think, a lot of people have parents that are like, you can be whatever you want. I believe it. You know what I mean? So I thought I can, but of course you have to do the work. You have to research. You have to have the experience. And so I think when I first started, I knew just enough to get started and to to make those connections and sell books and things like that. But I would recommend, and nowadays, this situation wouldn't happen because I would be able remotely, I would be able to find a position, most likely. That's not an issue anymore. I would definitely say for anyone that wants to become an agent to do lots of internships. I always have lots of interns. I try to make sure they have lots of experience because I think about how I was and like, you really want it. And I always try to find interns that are career minded, not just like trying to figure out like life or, they like to be around books. I really try to find interns that want to become agents so I can really give them that like a nice foundation and then promote within. So, and so I've had tons of tons of interns, but my junior agent that I have with me now is a former intern, and I have another one that is on that track. And I love it when I can really work and nurture them, get a good feel for their personalities and their work ethic and things like that, and kind of promote from within. So I kind of wish I had that for myself. So I try to be that for others.
The esteemed audience knows that I harp on this probably too much, but I want to see publishing decentralized from New York. I want to see them come out to the Midwest, go down to the South, because there's all these talented people who would be fantastic additions to any publishing house or agency, but they can't afford New York rent. They're not gonna come out and work 3 jobs to try and get a studio apartment in New York when they can buy a whole house for the same amount of rent here in the Midwest. So if we get them to, hopefully, with the pandemic, one nice thing coming out of that is telework is more of an option. People could be remote. So, how are you seeing the impacts of the pandemic? Are you able to reach out more to remote employees and things?
Well, I mean, my entire agency has always been remote, so there was no impact.
For sure.
For me, because now, for a time, everybody was remote. I was like, welcome to the club. I've been here. And you see great to work from home, right? Even though it is nice. The only thing, I wasn't able to travel. I was doing a lot of, before everything happened, the world shut down. I was traveling to conferences like once a month. So, being remote, I wanted to make sure that I'm, getting out there, going to New York often, going to LA, meeting editors, taking meetings and things like that. And so that kind of stopped. But what happened is that everyone discovered Zoom. And so we started having virtual meetings. And so, and in fact, I've actually made more connections with Zoom, just because I don't have to travel and, make schedules work and things like that. So it's been fun for me.
Yeah, when you're traveling places to do conferences or whatever, it's always a joy to meet other writers and publishing people. And even when it's not, it is, because at least you have a great story about how terrible it was that one time that you can tell forever going forward. But there's that added stress of I'm traveling, I'm away from my home. I got to make sure that I'm out of here so I can call my loved ones for a short period of time before I'm back. Whereas remote, we could have a wonderful hour-long conversation, the same conversation we would have had over coffee at a conference, but just right here through the screen. And then afterward, we're right back home. It's done. There's no commute. It's great.
Right.
Post-pandemic, I'm endorsing I'm endorsing Zoom. So whatever that's whatever that's worth. So 2011, you found your agency, and when you go to this first conference, you must be incredibly self-assured or bold, because you're walking up to authors and you're saying, I've got a new agency and I want you. How does that go?
Right. Well, I wasn't walking up, I was seated and they were coming to me, which is, it's kind of like the speed dating where you do like an 8-minute pitch. So I just had people come to me, sit down, and, when you're a new agent, you really have to sell yourself and you have to sell the agency. And I think at that point I was really just very, and still am, very excited and passionate about finding some good people, some good stories, and making some book deals. And, sometimes you find people that you resonate with, they resonate with your personality and your frequency that you're on. And it just, it works. And, I don't know, there's also, I guess, if you believe that you can do something and you have, you can back it up with like you've had some experience and you've done the research, you just do it. Just do it. So I wouldn't say that I was bold or anything, but I was confident in my abilities. That's it. Not just confident.
That's the proof is in the pudding, as they say. Here we are, 11 years later, and you've got a thriving literary agency. I know that the literary agents I've had on here in the past have said that on average, you're looking at between 3 to 5 years before you can expect to start making money as a literary agent. Yeah. I don't know if that's different when it's your agency and
it's still the same
on the door, or.
Yeah, I think, I can't remember exactly how long it took, but it was probably like between 2.5 years. Yeah,
that's accelerated.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, when you're any new agent, it's kind of like failure is not an option, and you work until you get it done. You know what I mean? Like, that's just kind of the mindset that I had, that I have always had, that I got from my family, my parents. Just, set your goal and achieve it. Failure's not an option. So that's just kind of how I am as a person. So I was able, you know what I mean? And so at that, like, I originally had maybe, 5 clients. It's like, okay, I only have 5 clients. I have to make 5. I can't like fail with one of these. You know what I mean? Like, otherwise I'm not achieving what I set out, and no one's going to want to work with me if I can't sell these 5. So, I was very motivated to sell my clients, which I did. So it was kind of like out of necessity.
And are you to the point now, 11 years later, that you could sell some others not, or is it still they're all getting sold?
Yeah, I got lucky that in the beginning, but I mean, any agent will tell you you're not going to sell everything, because it's really a crazy business, right? Like, we work on commission, and you're trying to sell something, but it relies on a lot of other things. A lot of people have to say yes. You have to find the editor. That editor's acquisition board has to agree. Their sales and marketing has to agree. Like, you know, a lot of different people have to say yes before. I say, honestly, it's a wonder how anything ever gets published, because it's like magic happens, you know, like the stars align just so, and then it's like, yes. But yeah, I'm still selling things, but there's always, you know, one that you're like, God, I couldn't sell it, but I always try my hardest. Um, I will pitch something till there's no one else to pitch it to, till I feel confident that I have done everything that I possibly can. I have shared this with every editor that on this planet that wants to read this, and they've all said no. I'm sorry, but you know what I mean. Like I will exhaust all possibilities so that I feel good about my efforts. I will never, you know, there's never a situation where it's like, you know, I sent it out to 5 people. They said no, but like that's not enough. But you know, it happens. Not happy.
When you're working that hard for your authors, I assume you expect that you can't be the only one working that hard. You want your authors to be meeting their deadlines and coming in, and failure is not an option for them either. Is that fair?
Try to tone it down a little bit when you know. Also, I was married to a Marine, so that didn't help my attitude of like, you know, being successful. You know what I mean? Like very like success oriented like environment. But I don't think I'm like that with my clients. I mean, I'm you know, I'm supportive and helpful, and they all. I mean, I don't any writer is going to do what they need to do to get their book sold. Like they, you know what I mean? Like it's not just like this is a hard thing. This is like this is joy and passion, and it's fun. Like you've written this book and you want to share it with the world, and it's exciting, and you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of like happiness and fun around being an agent for me, and selling books, and being able to call my client and say, hey, I got this book deal. You know, what do you want to do? Or going to a bookstore and seeing my clients' books. Like that always makes me super happy. Like never gets old. Always good. Whenever I go to any bookstore, I always check to see who's there, take pictures. Sometimes I'll post them. Sometimes I'll just send it to them, say, hey, saw your book at, you know, with this bookstore or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I've never had any issues with clients like not doing what they need to do, which is just write, revise, you know, and if something isn't turned in when it's supposed to be, like I have so many, you know, I have other things I need to be doing that I can usually say, okay, you know, take 2 more weeks, because I would rather something be done right and turned in late than done wrong and turned in on time. That doesn't help anybody.
So I assume the writer in that position where they know they're going to need another 2 weeks, so long as they're communicating with you, letting you know what's going on, that's going to be all right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those types of deadlines are more self-imposed. You know, the only time a deadline there's a problem is if they've got a book deal and their editor is saying, okay, this book is due at this time. But even then, you know, sometimes I can go to an editor and say, this writer has had a family emergency, or, you know, something has happened, or this has just been a little more challenging. Can they get 2 more weeks? And they'll check on, and sometimes there is room in the editorial or the publishing schedule to do so. Sometimes there's not. Maybe sometimes they'll say, sure, 2 weeks is fine. And sometimes they'll say, we could do 4 days, or we could do a week or something like that.
Gotcha. So you start off with 5 clients. How many clients do you represent now?
I can't say offhand, but I think it's probably like maybe 20, between 25 and 30. I'm not sure.
Is that a pretty comfortable, stable, the right word? Stable of authors? Okay.
Or roster. Yeah, I always do what's right for me. When I can take on more, I do. If I can't, then I stop. You know, occasionally you'll see I'm close to submissions, and that's because either I need a break and I just want to focus on what I have, or I've got enough. But I always you know, I'm the boss, so I'm not going to make myself do more than I can. You know what I mean? But I will push myself to do, like, if I find like I'm slacking off or something, which I don't really do, you know what I mean? Then I can take on a few more clients, but it always has to be like what I'm comfortable with, because I want to make sure that I have enough time. Because I'm very editorial, so I want to make sure I have time to work with each client in a timely fashion, work on their edits and pitch and things like that. So, yeah.
So how actively are you seeking clients as we record this?
So at the beginning of the year, I brought on several clients, several, like maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6, which is enough to keep me busy for like the first quarter. So we're kind of moving out of that, and I'm going to start looking again. I'm probably going to do like one more like big like push to see what I can find, and then call it quits for the year, and then focus on some other things. So I am looking, but I mean, I'm always looking, like it's hard not to like want a good story. You know what I mean? Like I'm always excited by like really great stories. So it's just a matter of like, if I'm not looking at my submissions, sometimes my assistant is, and I have asked her, if you see something that's really good, even though I'm not looking, let me know. So she'll, occasionally that does happen. It depends on my workload and, what I can take. I'm looking for less and less editorial the busier I get, but occasionally I'll find something and it just resonates with me for some reason, and I'm like, I don't care that it needs a lot of work. I want to see if we can get this like in really good shape and get it sold. That happens.
I can't remember which guest coined the phrase. I give them credit, but they called it submission brain, where you've been reading just submissions for so long that they're terrible, terrible, terrible. And then one is like slightly not terrible, not good, but slightly not terrible. Because you've been reading terrible for so long, the not terrible starts to look good. So they want to have somebody else look at it like, is this submission brain or is it really genuinely good?
Thing. Yeah, totally. I totally agree. Yeah. Yeah, but you can read so much that you're like, and sometimes you'll see something, and either that person, or you that they talked to you on social media, or you've met them in person, or they are a friend of a family member, not a family member, but a friend of a friend, or for some reason you like really really want this to work out, and it's not great. And you're like, okay, I know this is not great. Let me get a second opinion. Let me just double check. So it's just always good to have opinions. But like I said, it's a core part of my training, but it's also super helpful to be able to refer to, okay, what does someone else think about this type of thing? Like I said, but at the end of the day, it's my decision. And sometimes I'll read something, and then I haven't looked at the evaluations. Then I'll go back and just see if they are okay. That's what I thought. Oh, that's different. Let me go back and see if I agree with that.
I suspect that, I don't know, 50, 60% of people at least have, if not a novel, a screenplay, or an idea from one or both. So being a literary agent, you must get approached on a regular basis by, I don't know, the person who's come by to do the plumbing, or the mail person.
In my real life, no one knows what I do.
Oh, that's smart. So you don't have to worry about being at a party and somebody corners you and says, hey, I heard you like books. I got one.
No, not really. And many people outside of publishing don't know what a literary agent does. You know what I mean? Like, you'd be surprised. I have actually mentioned it, and like, oh, and there's like a look that's confused. I'm like, you don't know what that is, do you? They're like, are you like a publisher? You publish books? Like, what do you do? I get that a lot. Like, there's just like a general like, outside of publishing, if you're not into it, you might not know what those different positions are. They'll just say, I just help people get their books sold. And they're like, oh, cool. That's it. So there's not, in my real life, like, no one really knows. They just know I like to read, and I have books around me, like, everywhere. That's it. Oh, she's always like writing on her laptop. That's it. Yeah. It's a big surprise, but yeah.
Well, whatever it is, she seems to be doing well with it. So
Bookish her. That's about it. Even like for a long time, my mom was so confused. She was like telling people I was like a publisher. I'm like, Mom, I'm not a publisher. I'm like, what do you do? I mean, I know you do something with books. I'm like, yes, I help people write. Help them with their books, get them sold. So
my wife works in the tech sector. And so I've given up trying to explain to people what she does for a living, and she'll explain it and they'll just stare at her blankly and go, uh-huh. So I just say she internets for a living. Don't worry about it. It's going well. If you're not in the sector, it won't matter. So as far as all the folks that listen to this show who are very clued in, they know what's going on with publishing. They're going to send you the finest written queries. So how are they going to get your attention? What types of projects are you looking for right now?
Okay. What am I looking for? That I do try to update my website because it changes. You know, what I'm looking for changes. Sometimes I'll say I'm looking for this particular thing. I'll get a lot of it. I'll find like one or two that I want to work on, and then okay, I'm burned out. No more of that. So I do definitely, you know, sometimes I'll tweet about like what I'm looking for, and I update my website. But to answer your question, what am I looking for? I still have. Let's see. I think I would love to find some young adult, like some really great young adult, like sci-fi and fantasy. Um, I brought on a middle grade author that I'm really excited about, but I think I could take on another one or two middle grade, and that's just because I've got my younger sons are 14 and 11, and so we have gone through lots of middle grade fiction in this house, and I'm always like reading with them, like we listen to audiobooks in the cars and things like that. So it's really I would love to find something, I think, like that, some sort of really great middle grade like fiction with like light fantasy or sci-fi elements. Nothing contemporary.
So
Let me see what else. Also, it's getting really hard to find new or fresh domestic suspense because it's such a, I'm talking about kind of like the Gone Girl type books. Those are very, it's getting overdone. You know what I mean? It's hard to find something that's different from what's already out there. But if I could find something that was different, I think that would be interesting. And mystery, I think mystery and thrillers and suspense is kind of like my jam at the moment.
gotcha. And if there was a middle grade mystery thriller suspense, that would be just fine as well, right?
That would be great. Yeah. I'll tell you, I look at shows with my family. So we recently finished looking at Lab Rats. I don't know if you know that or not, on Disney. It's about like these kids with like bionic powers or whatever. So, and we've moved on to the next show, which is So we looked at Lab Rats, and then there was Mighty Med, which is about these two two comic story geek types, their word, not mine, and they discover like a superhero a superhero hospital in the comic book store, and it's about that. And so now the third series, which is like an extension, is those kids have somehow gotten powers or whatever. So I don't know, like that's where my brain is right now. So I would love to find something like that, I think. And I would love to find, like, I think, you know, it's very personal, like how agents think. I would love to find like the type of stories I want my sons to read. I think there's a lot of like, just with like the marketing trends, a lot of female driven stories out there, but it's like, I'm a mom of 3 boys, and I'm like, where are the books for boys? Like, I know that there's been eons of books for boys, but I want some more books for my boys to read. So I'm on that lookout for some really good stuff. Yeah.
So 14, 11, and how old was the third?
22.
Gotcha.
And we were in Japan for a while, so he went through like a manga phase. So I'm not into manga. I don't represent it, but I love Japan as a setting for like mythology based on like, you know, Japanese like culture. That's always like an interest as well.
So if somebody sends you a middle grade book for boys, is part of the approval process going to be to turn to your sons and say, hey, what do you think of this?
I might. I might. Actually, with the client that I currently have, I told my son, my 14-year-old, about the story. And he read like the first couple of pages, but then kind of just like got busy with other stuff, and I didn't go back. And I had already read it and knew that I loved it, and so but I did want to get his take. So I will eventually get him to read it, even though he's a client. It's already on submission, being read. But yeah, I probably would at least like, here's what this is about. Does this sound interesting to you?
Well, I mean, you'd be wasting a resource not to, right?
Yeah. And fortunately, he loves to read. They love to read, so.
So I'm looking over your submission requirements. Anybody can find these at hollowayliterary.com. You've got you want to have somebody come in, they would tell you salutation, just hello agent, and then they'll tell you the word count on the story, and you want to know that as early as possible, even before the pitch. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, the way you format a query, it doesn't matter as long as you have all those key elements, but it's just one of those things that most agents, including me, you want to know that that has the correct word count. Because if everything sounds perfect, but it's like 50,000 words over, it's a pass. Like, so you know, or if it's under, it's not, you haven't written enough, it's a pass. So it's a very important thing that lets me know immediately whether I need to keep reading or not. So yeah, I would like to have it in the beginning. Or otherwise, I'm just going to search for it at the bottom or wherever it is.
Well, I mean, if the pitch is really great and I'm 2,000 words over, you wouldn't say, hey, cut 2,000 words, or nope.
I didn't say 2,000. I said 30,000.
Oh, 30. Okay, sorry.
You'd be amazed at how many people will send something 50,000 words over, 80,000 words over, 50,000 under. That's why I like 2,000. That's fine. That's nothing. I'm talking about, like, okay, you've written, you know, let's say, for example, you have written, you know, a mystery that should be between 70 and 90,000, and it's 180,000. You've got 2 books here. You know, okay, you need to kind of go back and figure out how you want to, you're not ready for an agent. Like, that's the kind of thing I mean when I like, let me see what the word count is. So if it's 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, even 10,000, like, you know, that's like a judgment call. Like, sometimes if something is like science, you know, sci-fi or fantasy, it may be a little over because of all the world building. But you know, so you can kind of allow for that. It just depends on other factors, whether or not you. But so I'm not like crazy, like 2,000, you know, off with his head. No, it's like, you don't know what you're doing right now. Please go, you know. And I have said to like writers, this idea sounds really fantastic, but you are like 40,000 over. If you decide to cut 40,000 words, resubmit and I'll take a look. Things like that.
Fair enough. So not even off with his head then. Just very, very reasonable, practical advice.
Well, yes.
So how many queries are you getting on a daily, weekly basis? Just estimate.
I probably get I don't know, 100, 150 a day.
Gotcha. And I had Lindsay Eager, previous guest, check the back catalog, esteemed author, well worth your time. She had worked as an assistant for Mary Cole, and she let me know that one of the things that gave her the most confidence as an author was reading the submissions that came through, because she said she estimated that about 80% of them were ridiculously, woefully unqualified, could immediately be rejected. Is that a fair estimate, you think?
80%? Wow, that's super high. Just outright rejected based on the query?
I don't know. Your inbox isn't the one she was looking at. What would you say it is?
For me, I mean, let's see. I hate having to ask, like, give me a statistic, give me a number. Like, when I go through my inbox, I mean, I can definitely go through and see like the things that I haven't asked for. Like, if it's a genre, you know what I mean? Like, okay, no, I don't represent that. Or, I mean, so I asked for a certain way to format, like if you have the wrong name, or if you have sometimes people will put like a crazy like sentences, like just weird stuff. It's like, I can tell that you didn't read the submission guidelines. You know what I mean? Like, so your agents are looking for clues that this is not, that this person had, like, they're professional, that they're really taking the business serious, that they've done their research, that they're submitting to the right person. And sometimes you can tell just right off the bat that they basically disqualify themselves with their query. So that percentage that do that kind of thing would be, it's much lower than 80%. I mean, I would say like 10 to 15% just immediately disqualify themselves. Once I get past that, and then I'm looking at the one I'm reading, then like accounting for like poorly written, or you can tell that they're not ready for an agent, they need more craft classes. That's where it's really like the number goes up. I think many people are pitching agents before they're ready to do so. Like, I hate to say this, but if you are on your first book, your baby, your first book is never going to be your best book. You know, it's not. You know, a lot of times when you have a writer and they're like, this is their debut novel, they've probably written 3 books before. You know, this is only the first book that has come out. So, you know, a lot of times, so that number, I would say, I don't know, 60% should not be querying. So I guess if you add that to like the 10, 15%, we're getting closer to that 75%. So, I mean, there's some very like, there are reasons that things are immediately like removed. So I guess that number is high. Maybe 75, 80% or just aren't ready to be pitching. So yeah.
Just speaking from my own personal experience, I have never been more confident in a book than I was my first book. Back before I knew what I was doing, I couldn't have been more confident. Every book since, like, oh my, now I know all the things that could be improved. That's many years ago, and so now I'm a little bit more humble about how I put something together. But that first book, it's gold. Print that thing. Let's sell.
It's not abnormal to think that every writer's like, I have. Because like everyone who has like actually written a book for the first time, like they deserve kudos for like actually completing a book. You know, like it's hard. It's not easy to like write a book and be done. You know what I mean? And to go through revisions, and like, okay, it's done. It's just that. But like I said, there are exceptions to every rule. There's somebody who has written a first book. It's the first book they ever wrote, and it's like it's amazing. That does happen, but it's not the norm. You know what I mean? So I love it when someone has sends me a query, and I'll always ask them if I ever, you know, get to we're having a conversation. So how many books have you written before this? Like I'm hoping they're like 2 or 3, because then I know that what I have is not gonna, you know what I mean? It's not gonna have the mistakes of like a first book. It's gonna be, by the time you have written 2 or 3 books, practice novels, that 4th book or that 3rd or 4th book, you know, it's probably gonna be well written. You know, you've worked out the kinks. You've learned how to plot. You've learned how to do natural dialogue. You've learned how to, you know, create natural flesh and blood characters. And those are things that, like writing a book is a long, arduous process. But you have to practice writing. I guess you could do it with like short stories. You know, you could really, or novellas or something like that. But most people that want to write books, they just like write a book. But it's like you need to learn how to write. You can only learn how to write a novel by writing novels, right? So you have to write 2 or 3 novels before you really get to that point where you're like, I need it. I'm good. I'm ready for an agent, and an agent wants to see that. Nobody wants to hear that, because that's like, you know, sometimes it may take you like 2 years to write a book, or 6 months or 9 months. Like no one wants to hear like I need to do 2 or 3 of those before I get an agent. But you know, it assures usually that when you finally are done with all that practice, you've got a really well-written book, probably.
Wasn't the legend that Stephanie Meyer had a dream and then got up and wrote her first book, and it was obviously perfect, no room for criticism. Twilight is probably our finest piece of literature. Leave me alone in the comments. Anyway.
That, you know, when people dream up a book, I don't know where that's coming from, but I've heard that before. I actually have a client who has published many books, and one of her ideas, she says, was like a fully formed idea that came to in a dream. And you know, historically that has happened to people, you know. So if you dream an entire book, then that might be like divinely sent to you, and you're going to be like famous and make a bunch of money and have TV shows, and you know, it can happen. Never say never.
Well, that's how every writer should begin every query, even if it's not true. This was divinely inspired, because how can you reject something that was divinely inspired? Although, presumably, if that's happening, then you will also have a premonition or a vision that, oh, this book is coming to my inbox today. I better pay attention for it. So, assuming that doesn't happen, that remaining 25% of quality books, what's going to catch your eye? What's something an author can do to let you know their profession? Just follow the instructions and catch you with a good pitch, or is there something else they can do?
Well, following the directions does wonders, right? Like you'd be amazed at like how happy it makes me and many agents just to know that you've actually followed the directions, because it makes you stand out against the people that don't. Like, when you see someone who doesn't follow like your submission guidelines, which you have created for a reason, you're like, okay, 100 people have done this and these 2 people have not. Like it just makes you think about them. Can they follow directions? Are they going to be a problem? Are they, do they only want to do things their way? How are they going to be in edits? Like it makes you just, and not to say that they could not follow, directions because they made a mistake or something, you don't, I'm not like draconian about it, but it's just like, it's something that you notice, when you're reading 500 queries at one time and you're like, okay, this one guy called me, June, he didn't put this here, this is not here, this pass, he's a pass. Like these other people all did it. Let me spend my time on these. Like that's part of submission brain too, when you're like, yes, 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 no, yes, 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 no, because it's in all like bold, like like the silly things, or the query is like this long and I can't find like what it's about. I don't know. It's just, it's like just follow the directions. That it's very helpful when you do that. But to answer your question, how can you? The way that the best thing that you can do is give me what I'm looking for. The best thing any writer can do is to find the agent that is looking for what you've written. That's why like research is really important. Sometimes it's really clear to me that someone has sent something to me and they've gotten my information from either an old post from 2012, because I asked for certain things back then that I'm not asking for now, and they may reference that. So there's stuff floating around from back then, or they have no idea what I'm looking for, and that's an automatic pass for me. Like no interest. I've never ever said I want to read that. Not for me. You know what I mean? So don't do yourself a favor to the writers and make sure that you're sending the work that you've done to an agent that wants to read it. So send me what I'm looking for, like see what I'm representing. And it doesn't mean like, for example, sometimes an agent can find something and they didn't know they wanted, you know what I mean? But usually it's the same genre. Like someone could send me something that's like crazy off the wall, but it needs to at least be in the genre that I'm asking for. You know what I mean? Like, because sometimes it's hard to like know what an agent wants, but that's why you always recommend to writers kind of use like manuscript wish lists, publishers marketplace, find agents that have stated I'm looking for this type of thing, make a list, and then like follow them on whatever social media that you may or that you use, and like get a feel for their personality. What do they talk about? Have they ever mentioned that they're looking for something that you've written? Have they traveled to a place that your story is set in? Like all those are kind of like clues that, okay, this could be a good agent. And it's hard. I understand that it's hard because there's a million different agents and we all want different things. But it's like, I'm looking for, sometimes it's very specific, you know what I mean? But it's like, send me what I want to read. That's all I can say. Like, send me the genres that I'm asking for. I talk a lot about different stuff, online. Like, I don't think it should be like a mystery, like the stuff that I like. I don't know.
Well, I'm assuming you're not asking just because that's stuff you like, but it's because the stuff that editors are you know where to send that. You would be able to add it to represent that well. I'm assuming this is part of why you're choosing the categories.
It's kind of like a it's like a cycle. You know what I mean? It's like if I love romance set in one country, I'm gonna make sure that I know all the editors that are looking for that. You know what I mean? Like so, for me personally, I'm an agent because I like to read and I like to write and I like to work with writers and I like working in the publishing industry. But for me, for this to be enjoyable for me, and I need to be working with things that I'm interested in. So that's why I'm always like, I'm looking for this, or I like this. So I make sure that I'm able to sell what I like. If that makes sense. So, I mean, I'm never gonna work for something that I don't like, but it's hot and it sells. Some agents will. Some agents are like, this is what the market wants. I don't care what it's about. I'm gonna sell it. I'm not like that. Many agents aren't like that. So I only work on things that I'm interested in, but also I know I can sell.
So I know you're asking for the first 15 pages. You mentioned earlier you might ask for the first 50 pages if you're interested in a partial submission. And I'm always curious, why not just ask for the full thing? Obviously, if the first 2 pages are trash, you're not going to read the rest. But if you get hooked, if you're really excited, I want you to have the whole thing right there, right now. Don't leave your comfortable reading place. Stay with it for a minute. give me a shot. Why ask for less?
It's just I guess at the end of the day, an attachment is an attachment, but it's like I already have so much to read. Like, don't give me more than I asked for. That's, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, if sometimes something will come in and it's like, oh my God, this is so good. I need the whole thing. That has happened. But like with me, there's a process. I have sometimes I'll have 3 different people read, and one reads the 15 pages, one reads the 50, and one reads the full. And you know, it helps me kind of pace myself, I guess, not to have the whole thing. But occasionally, if sometimes I will go through my queries and something will just like really stand out to me, and I don't send it to my submission coordinator to like request it. I'll just shoot them a note, send me the whole thing, because I'm pretty sure I want to read this right now. So that very rarely happens, but it does happen occasionally. So, but it's just most agents don't want more than they need. Like, and the other thing is that when you read a manuscript, if those first 50 pages don't work, then you don't want to read the rest. Like that, you know what I mean? Like if it's not set up properly and the writing's not good and all that, everything's not there, there's no point to reading the rest of it.
That makes sense. No, I would never advocate reading a whole thing if you've read how many submissions, pretty early on, I imagine, maybe even before the end of the first page, whether there's something here or not. I also know an author who was out with his wife for an anniversary dinner and he got an agent from an email. Hey, I'm interested in reading more pages. Like, oh, we got to go. I got to go send the whole thing right now.
I mean, very rarely, but I had a client that sent me something. Well, he wasn't a client then. I think I was actually in my inbox, the submissions inbox, and saw the email come in. And I read the query and I was like, send this to me right now. Like, send this to me. He sent it immediately. I signed him the next day. That never happens for me, by the way. It just worked out. It was like January 2nd. And I just I personally don't, I go into my inbox like every couple of months, but my interns and assistants, they're all reading it like all the time. And he was like, lucky day, because he just sent it and I read it and I was like, this is amazing. I want to sign this guy. And it happened. That's the fastest. I never move that fast. never works that well. But that was amazing. But sometimes, like when you see something and you read it and you're like, this is so good. Like, it's that feeling any reader gets when you find a book and you're like, I'm going to read this whole book in one setting. I'm stopping everything. Sorry, kids. Find something and make peanut butter and jelly. I'm going to read this whole story. You know what I mean? It's like that kind of feeling, and that's what agents want to feel. When it's a very exciting feeling when you're like, oh, this is really good. I'm going to read this whole thing. Got to read it. So.
I assume that feeling is one of the reasons you're checking your inbox and going through the pain of all these other queries that aren't that,
Yeah.
among other things. Well, you tell me, what are the best things about being a literary agent?
Being able to make money by reading.
Sure. That makes sense.
Yes. Making money by reading and writing, editing. Like those are my favorite things to do ever. Like always, since I was a little kid, I, was just like to read. So being able to make money and doing what I love is like the best. That's the first. The second, but like almost a tie, is just being able to help. I love working with writers and being able to help other writers get their books, published. That is like I don't know what's the word. It's a vicarious happiness and thrill for me to know that this person came to me with like a Microsoft Word document, and we worked on it, and then now you can go to the bookstore and they're doing signings. Like that's amazing. I love being a part of that.
We've talked about the impossible part of getting from the query to the full. So now you are that author that has caught you on January 2nd. You're immediately interested. You love the manuscript. Fantastic. So we'll just assume that. How do you evaluate the author? What are you looking for ahead of some sort of contact? And then what are you looking for? I assume there's a phone call involved. How are you deciding, is this person, in addition to being a great writer, eligible to be a great client?
Right. Always looking for clues in the email communication initially. Like you want to make sure that there's no issues, red flags. Sometimes people can, you want to make sure that you're working with a client that's going to be easy to work with. There's no problems. And so sometimes, you can tell, and I don't mean specifically like I found a manuscript and it's great. Now the person's a problem, but you can tell sometimes people will argue with you. You may say something offhand like, I may suggest that you do this, and they become argumentative. Like people that argue with like strangers via email are probably not someone you want to work with. Or you can tell sometimes writers have been submitting their work for a really long time and are bitter and jaded and hate agents, and they take it out on whoever they have, you know what I mean? And that comes through. So those kind of people you don't want to work with. So you kind of look for clues for their communication style, how easy they are to work with, just via email. And then, so if I see something I want to offer representation, we'll have a call. Nowadays, it's a Zoom, but sometimes it could be a phone call, and just talk and get a feel. I don't immediately jump into like, let's talk about your manuscript. I'm like, tell me about yourself. Where are you from? What do? You have kids? Have pets? Like, just kind of build a rapport and see if we like each other. Because it's not just, do I like this person? Do they like me? Do you want to work with me? If you're fortunate, you'll have multiple agents to choose from. And so it's about making sure that it's a partnership. So do you want to work with me? Do you think that I can help you? Because are you going to trust me to like help you achieve your goals? So they have to figure that out. I have to figure that out. Do I want to work with this person all on like one call? And then offer representation.
Obviously, you don't want to work with anybody that's a total jerk or where there's a clear personality conflict and you're going to be fighting the whole time. But I'm always curious because if once we get past a certain point, you're going out on submission. I'm trusting that you're doing that while I'm working on my next book. I'm feeling free to reach in and check in with you every so often to let you know what I'm working on, questions about what's going on. But otherwise, to a certain degree, I'm looking for a professional that's going to do the selling of the book that I can't do because you've got the contacts I don't have. How important is it that we become, and I'm great friends, how important is it for an author to evaluate an agent? Hey, is this best friend material versus is this unbelievably awesome salesperson who's going to land the dream contract?
Right. Well, I mean, I think I'm assuming that you're working with an agent that knows their job. So assuming that you're working with someone, you know what I mean? Like my assumption is that you're pitching or you're submitting your work to an agent that has a track record of selling the type of books that you sold and can do the job. So that's all like assuming that's there. Then you want to make sure that the personality meshes and that kind of thing. So that the other part of making sure that you have someone that can sell your work, that's part of the research that you need to do online, which you can go to Publishers Marketplace and see what they have sold. That's like the very first thing I would do if I was looking for an agent. I would see if they have, one, sold anything, two, have they sold things similar in, you know, at least in the same genre. I don't necessarily, like if I was looking for an agent, it wouldn't like scare me off that, say for example, I've written a mystery and they've only sold romance, because we meet people, you know, just because I'm not selling something in a particular genre, it doesn't mean that I don't know people in that field. You know what I mean? If I go to a writer's conference, there's all sorts of editors there, or I can take calls with people because I know that I want to move into a certain genre. So that would be, if I didn't see a track record for that genre, it would be a question I would ask them. So do you feel like you have the connections to sell this book? But I think at the end of the day, an agent that is established and that has a good, you know, track record, period, should know how to sell a book. Like I wouldn't, you know what I mean? Like, just like I said, if you have like sold a bunch of books, if you're like a nonfiction agent, and you've never sold fiction, if I was not in the business out and just have read a bunch of like articles about how to beware of agents, I would probably be like, oh, you've only sold nonfiction. Do you think you can sell my fiction? But as an agent, I would find that kind of offensive, because it's like they're a professional literary agent. If they can sell at nonfiction, they can sell fiction. It's just a matter of like contacting the correct agents. You know what I mean? Sorry, contacting the proper editors. Like an editor that is looking for a certain type of genre is not going to say no to an agent because they've never sold in that field before. You know what I mean? Or because they don't know them, they've never met them before, they're still going to read their work. So, I mean, my first goal would be to look for an agent, a successful agent, period. But if you have to choose, if you're fortunate enough to have 2 or 3 to choose from, sure, you may want the one that has had, you know, say you're writing romance and you want an agent that has sold 10 books in romance. Of course, that person is they may have an edge over an agent who has only sold nonfiction. But if you don't have a choice and you have a nonfiction agent that is, you know, well established and has a great, you know, maybe you talk to their clients and like everything is all good, they can probably sell your work too. You know, it just depends. Like if they're asking, agents don't usually ask for things that they're not interested in, that they can't properly edit, that they can't sell. I'm not talking about the ones that are scammers or that are like, you know, there's bad apples out there, and I try not to read too much like absolute beware, that kind of stuff, but I know that there's like bad agents out there and people that are like, yeah, I can do this, and they can't, like, you know. But there's so many good agents out there. Like, just do your homework and try to find the good agents that are out there.
Just listen to this podcast, esteemed audience. If they're here, they're a great agent. That's how it works.
Now, like, there's, you know what I mean? Like, there's no reason why you can't find good agents.
Gotcha. So I'm watching our time, and it's flying by. A question that I ask everybody that comes on this show, and I would never want to skip, not even for one episode. Nikki Terpilowski, have you ever seen a flying saucer and or a ghost?
You ask everybody that?
I do.
I've never seen a ghost. And the one time I thought I saw a spaceship, I told my dad, and he said, we lived near Fort Bragg. He said, that's probably like a stealth like plane or something going to the base. And I was like, okay, so maybe. So I guess it wasn't.
That's just what the aliens wanted you to think. Another question I ask every publishing professional who's good enough to come on the show is that publishing does not have a great track record of diversity or inclusion. Neither does the United States, but we're focused on publishing. We know that there's been a movement for we need diverse books. Where do you feel publishing is in terms of becoming more diverse? And then what is Holloway Literary doing to increase diversity within publishing?
Well, I think that like right now is the best time to be a diverse author because everyone's looking for it and very eager to publish and correct mistakes of the past. So that's like right now, like this second right now. It may not be the same in a year or two, but right now it's hot. And like most people are saying, like hopefully diversity is not a trend, right? We don't want the idea that anyone that a person of color or diverse backgrounds can write something and that there's not a market for it. That's not a trend. You know what I mean? That's a universal concept. I think that everyone can write books that resonate with other people. They don't have to be from a certain group. But I think I'll tell you as an example, in the past, if I had an African American author, say for example, maybe romance, there would have been only 3 or 4 editors to send it to. And that's something that I had to consider, like with my clients. It's like, I would have to have a conversation, like, just so you know, there's like 4 editors that are looking for this. And once I pitch them and they all say no, that's it. It's not like that anymore. And I'm really happy about that. But now I could send, I'm just making up a number. Now there's 14 or there's 24. Like people, the publishing houses are very open and looking for different types of stories, not just African American, but like different, different cultures, different like ethnicity, everything. Like everything is wide open right now. So it's I think it's a really great time, but like I hope it doesn't change because there was a period of time, maybe late 90s when African American fiction was super hot. It was like when Terry McMillan came out, Omar Tyree, there was just a lot of Lynn Harris, lots of African American authors. And then it died down, like people stopped reading it or something, which I don't think, there's always a disconnect, I think, with what publishers are putting out and what readers are asking for. It happened with chick lit, for example. Chick lit was really hot. They were pumping it out, and then all of a sudden they stopped. They said, oh, well, no one's reading it anymore, so we're going to stop making it. And then it became like a bad word in the industry. And then it resurfaced a couple of years ago as rom-coms. And now it's hot again because like publishing has said it is. But like people that read that, they don't like stop reading it. It kind of comes from the top down, the trends. So hopefully the idea that diverse stories are marketable and resonate with people outside of those diverse readerships is here to stay. In terms of what does Holloway Literary do? We do what we always do from day one. I am a person of color. I've always looked for authors, diverse authors. I've always known, even if it was going to be a hard sell, try to take it on and pitch it and do my best by it. It's just easier now. Not easier to sell, but there's more people that are willing to read it, which is great. And it's almost like an overcorrection right now because it's like people are so eager to find diverse voices right now. I hope that it doesn't overcorrect and then it goes back to like, no one wants to read those voices. I think that it should just be like part of the market, that there's lots of different people in the world, there's lots of different stories, and there's space for all of them. But yeah, I have personally have always looked for different types of stories. Like, I mean, I'm African American, so there was never like, I'm not doing anything different. I'm just looking for the same good stories I've always looked for. It's just easier to get editors to read it.
May that continue going forward. Is the hope. And then an impossible question. We'll think about landing this thing. I acknowledge it's impossible right up front because I'm going to ask you to predict the future. And to the best of my knowledge, that's not something that you can do. But looking at publishing, looking at the way the houses have consolidated and appear to be continuing to consolidate unless the U.S. U.S. Justice Department puts a stop to it. Looking at some of the impact of the pandemic, looking at the high turnover rates for editors, what is the state of publishing now, and how do you see publishing evolving in terms of how are you preparing your authors for the future of publishing?
Right. Well, I mean, I always tell, this sounds kind of cliche, but I encourage my writers to always write what they want to write. Like, I don't think that you don't write to a trend, because it never ends well to write to something that is hot right now, and then when you finally finish the book and I'm can sell it for you, it's not hot anymore. You know what I mean? So one, I always tell my writers to write the stories that you want to write. Now, in terms of, okay, is this in terms of marketability, which that's my job, is to make sure that I can guide them to do like what's going to make sense for them, is to try to figure out how to take the ideas that they have and move them towards a genre or a concept that's like hot. For example, I have a client that has been writing cozy mysteries, and she's trying to pivot into domestic suspense. And as I mentioned earlier, domestic suspense is getting harder and harder to find like really fresh ideas. So I'm working with her to, while staying true to herself as a writer and what she's interested in, trying to find a way to make her story different enough to stand out so the editors want to read it. So that's my goal as an agent for my writers, is to help them write the stories that they want to write, but in a way that is marketable. And in terms of what that looks like, it's a hard call. That's why I don't know. I don't like to make predictions, because if you have done something based on a trend and then it doesn't work out, you're not going to feel good about that. But if you have written something the story that you've always wanted to write, or something that you enjoy, and it doesn't work out, well, you still have written something, you've spent time on something that you cared about, that you liked, that you loved. You know what I mean? So it still may hurt, but it doesn't hurt as bad as like feeling like you sold out to a trend and then it didn't work out, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm answering your question though. How am I helping?
An impossible question. So,
in terms of, okay, how am I telling them to prepare? The best way that you can like navigate like a rocky industry, honestly, is to be the best possible writer that you can be. Like, continue to like practice writing, continue to learn, like write the strongest story that you can learn, the story that you can write. Not only is it my job to like keep them aware of like trends and what's going on in the marketplace, but they have to also be aware of what is going on in film and TV, because that kind of bleeds into publishing, so that they can be aware of like what they're writing and how they can change it. For as an example, if you are writing mystery, for example, you may see that in like TV and like in streaming, like dark and edgy is very hot right now. So eventually, and it already has, having really dark and edgy mysteries is very popular right now. So if that's something that resonates with you, then you should think about doing something like that. But I don't know. This is an impossible question with an impossible answer. I don't know. I just tell my writers to stay true to themselves, be the best writer that they can be, because it's hard to deny good writing. Like, be a good writer. Don't I can't sell bad writing, but I can sell good writing no matter what the market is. So just write what you want, be the best possible writer, and I don't care what's going on in the market. I'm still gonna try to sell it. Like, it doesn't matter how many people have been have left the industry. I'm gonna send it to those 4 people that are left, and we're gonna see what happens. You know what I mean? So I don't worry about it. I just continue and do what I need to do, and that's about it. I don't think I answered your question.
oh, I think you answered a better one, and I think that's the perfect note to end on. Do what you do, and if it makes sense. Where can esteemed audience find you online, follow you on social media, and all that good stuff?
Okay, so I am a woman reading on Twitter and Instagram.
And then is it hollowayliterary.com?
and then you can go to HollowayLiterary.com, my website, and also the agency has Twitter and Instagram as well. You can see what all our clients are up to, the books that are coming out, and things like that.
And as always, esteemed audience, for more interviews like this one with agents, editors, book people, you know the people, go to middlegradeninja.com. And God willing, I'm alive. I'll see you next week.